gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, coming to you once again from Brazil. Now I'm in Sao Paulo, a city of over 11 million. I just came back from Brasilia, their capital city, where I spoke at was the first ever Association of Classical and Christian Schools conference in Brazil. It's very exciting what's happening here. In fact, many people are calling it a miracle. Conservative classical Christian schools are literally popping up everywhere. I was here back in 2018, 8 years ago. There were no classical schools. Now I'm getting reports there are over 50 or 60 classical schools with thousands of students. They're going to surpass the United States in this classical education renewal in just a few years. But while I'm here, it's actually what's happening in neighboring Peru towards the west that's catching all the headlines. The far leftist socialist political establishment there just got absolutely rocked, and the shockwaves are being felt all across Latin America, literally like never before. So the nationalist populist Keiko Fujimori, she's the most persistent and battle-hardened conservative fighter in Peruvian politics. She just won the presidential election there. So if you didn't know, yesterday Peruvians headed to the polls all across the country for a presidential runoff between Keiko Fujimori, she is the conservative standard bearer there in Peru, and Roberto Sanchez, who's a far leftist congressman, self-described political heir to the jailed ex-president Pedro Castillo. And this really was the big runoff yesterday between these top two vote getters back from their April election, I believe. And even then, we were seeing a very significant turn to the right for Peru. Keiko won more votes in that first round than anyone else in that crowded field. And her opponent, Sanchez, he actually came in third. And admittedly, yesterday was a real nail-biter. Polls showed them neck and neck going into yesterday's election. But in the end, voters made it very clear they went with this rock star of Peruvian right-wing politics, Keiko Fujimori, I should get my names right, whose family has become a bit of a staple in Peruvian conservative politics. If you don't know her father, Alberto Fujimori, he was a very successful president. Back in 1990, Peru was on its knees. The economy was in a free fall. Hyperinflation, if you can believe it, was topping 7,000%. Marxist terror groups were bombing cities, massacring civilians. And so into that chaos stepped Alberto Fujimori, the son of Japanese immigrants. And at the time, he was a complete political outsider, again, very much like Trump. He was an agricultural engineer, would never held office a day in his life. And he won. He won overwhelmingly, and he in turn stabilized the economy. He crushed the Marxist insurgency. And for millions of Peruvians, that name, Fujimori, it's salvific. They see him as the man who saved their country. Now, of late, over the last several years, Peru, unfortunately, has gone back, descending into left-wing madness. And they've been trying to stop Keiko Fujimori from picking up her father's political mantle. Yes, of course, she was jailed. She was put on pretrial detention over trumped-up corruption charges, campaign finance allegations, and the like. I mean, they all play by the same book. The left-wing establishment has done everything they possibly could to thwart her political ascendancy. And as you can see, just like what they did with Trump back in the States, it was all ultimately for naught. The Peruvian people have risen up. They want nationalist populism. They want to make Peru great again. They want a thoroughgoing Peru first leader. They're done with this insane left-wing Marxist ideology, and now they got their wish as of yesterday. This is a country that tried the radical left And it was a disaster, as it always is. And now Peruvians are demanding something very different. And so they've now officially turned to the populist right. And Peruvians are not alone. You guys know this if you've been following this channel for some time now, and if not, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. But you'll know there's really nothing short of a right-wing tidal wave, a literal populist right tsunami that's sweeping the far-left Marxists out of Latin America. It's incredible. It's pretty stunning stuff. Latin America as a whole is turning to the right. You'll love this. In 2025, the political right won every single election held in Latin America. Every single one. Ecuador, they run Bolivia, Chile, Honduras, and yes, by the way, you heard that right, Bolivia. Remember, Bolivia wanted to be the next Venezuela, right? They were under this socialist regime of Evo Morales-aligned governments for 20 straight years, and they have officially flipped right. It really all started in the end with the great Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, who just redefined Latin American politics by eliminating gang violence throughout their nation and just completely remaking the social and cultural life of the nation. Before Bukele, El Salvador had the highest murder rate per capita in the entire Western world. After Bukele, they are now the lowest. It turns out all they needed was a new president. Now, of course, that new president rightly has an 85% approval rating. Then in 2023, you had, of course, Javier Milei winning the Argentine presidency, just in amazing libertarian style, right? A chain-wielding libertarian economics professor who called himself an anarcho-capitalist. He has since slashed government spending. He's finally tamed Argentina's runaway inflation, and he secured Argentina's first budget surplus in over a decade. Then in 2024, you had Daniel Noboa, a right-wing businessman. He won Ecuador's presidency on a platform of crushing the cartels that had turned the country into one of the most dangerous in the hemisphere. And again, people looked at El Salvador and said, why are we living this way? We just need a new president. And they got it. And then after Trump won in November of that year, of 2024, like I said, every single election throughout the continent since has turned to the nationalist populist right. So the trend is undeniable. Right-leaning candidates have now won approximately 2/3 of the region's elections since 2023. The so-called pink tide, that's what they called it during the Biden years, the so-called pink tide that flooded Latin America with socialism and Marxism in the early 2000s and most recently with the Biden regime. It is absolutely receding. And the right is filling every inch of the space it leaves behind. They're calling it the Trump effect. Voters are realizing that things don't have to be this way, that the left has done something that they don't have to live with. And they're tired of the rampant crime, they're tired of the rampant inflation, they're tired of watching Venezuela, the crown jewel of the Latin American left, become a catastrophic failed state that sent 8 million refugees fleeing across the continent. When you live next door to the left's greatest experiment and you watch it produce mass starvation and just blatant dictatorship, all the while seeing El Salvador and Argentina flourishing economically, socially, culturally, I mean, the choice is rather obvious. Now, that said, something even more astonishing is contributing to this massive right-wing swing in Latin America, and it's actually something that you did. Something that you did back in November of 2024, and I'm about to show you how you're changing the world in ways you never even imagined. Wait until you see this.
But first, right now, an estimated 31 million Americans are taking GLP-1 medications like Ozempic and Wegovy. But as more people start using them, more concerns are starting to surface as well. In just the past few months alone, lawsuits tied to these drugs have nearly doubled in the United States, jumping from around 2,000 cases at the beginning of the year to nearly 4,000 today. I mean, look at these celebrities who succumb to what's called Ozempic face. That doesn't look like the picture of health to me. Now, some of these side effects could be much more serious, including stomach paralysis, organ death, anxiety, depression, and sudden vision loss. Some people are even reportedly dying. For many people, weight gain may have less to do with willpower and more to do with what's happening in your gut. Researchers are learning more every year about how much the gut microbiome impacts things like cravings, bloating, inflammation, digestion, mood, energy levels, and long-term weight management. So instead of simply slowing the digestive system down, many people are now looking for ways to actually support their gut naturally. And that's one reason kimchi has gotten so much attention of late. Kimchi has 900 plus beneficial probiotics that help support digestion, reduce bloating, improve regularity, and promote a healthier gut environment naturally. Some studies have even pointed to kimchi's remarkable ability to support healthy body composition. In one preclinical study, researchers observed body fat reductions of up to 31.8%. Now, the problem is that most people simply aren't eating enough kimchi consistently to see meaningful results. So that's why Brightcore created Kimchi One, with over 900 plus strains of beneficial bacteria that deliver all the benefits of real kimchi in convenient capsules. No taste, no smell, non-GMO, and 100% made right here in the USA. Today, you can try Kimchi One by clicking the link below for 25% off your order, or for the best deal available, call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off plus free shipping. Give them a call now at 888-597-0233. That's 888-597-0233.
So here's what's really going on. The collapse of the international left in Latin America isn't just about bad policy. A significant part of it is actually about money, specifically billions of US taxpayer dollars that were quietly propping up leftist NGOs, activist organizations, and political infrastructure all across the developing world, but most particularly all across Latin America. And it was coming from none other than one USAID. Now, when Doge effectively dismantled USAID in early 2025, canceling 90% of its contracts and folding its remnants into the State Department, something absolutely remarkable happened as a result. All of a sudden, we start to see all over the world leftist civil society organizations, especially in our hemisphere, from Colombia to Peru to Venezuela, begin shutting down. Leftist organizations started shutting down. Programs literally evaporated overnight. Political advocacy networks that had seemed deeply rooted suddenly had no roots at all. The White House itself documented what this money was funding, right? You remember it. Millions in LGBT activism in Guatemala, tourism projects in Egypt, and ideologically driven programs with near zero accountability to the people that they claimed to serve. Meanwhile, organizations tied to radical leftist causes were receiving US taxpayer funds year after year after year with no questions being asked. The USAID shutdown didn't just save money, it exposed the truth. The international left was never organically popular, or certainly was never as organically popular as it appeared. It was manufactured. It was sustained by an artificial life support system of foreign dollars. Strip away the funding, and you find out what people actually believe. And in Latin America, what they believe turns out to be increasingly conservative. This is actually one of the the difficult things that the political left is learning the hard way here, even in the United States. This demographic that they kept trying to bring in through an open border turns out to be a relatively conservative demographic. And you know what? It's even happening here in Brazil. Flavio Bolsonaro, he's the eldest son of the former President Jair Bolsonaro. He's running for president. And polls are showing that he's not just competitive, he's actually winning. As recently as April of this year, a Datafolha poll showed Flavio numerically ahead of their current president, the ultra-Marxist Luiz Lula, 46 to 45. That's huge. That's the first time as a challenger Flavio had ever led in that polling series. I need not tell you that Flavio faces some major headwinds. The establishment left has unleashed a massive smear campaign against him, accusing him of all kinds of fraud. Again, the same thing that they were doing with Fujimori, which is, of course, given the current government in Brasilia, it's probably the most ironic accusation imaginable. I'll just say that. And the right as a whole here in Brazil is a bit fragmented, with other right-wing figures and parties pulling votes from the conservative pool. So the left has been able to kind of divide and conquer here. But that said, the Bolsonaro name carries a lot of weight here in Brazil. Nothing fires up the populist right base more than a Bolsonaro on the ticket. Jair Bolsonaro back in 2018 won a landslide victory. So we'll obviously be keeping a very close eye on how things develop. But what's absolutely clear is this. If the Latin American right-wing wave continues, like we just saw in Peru going with Fujimori, Brazil will feel it. The Latin American right is rising, and there's literally nothing that the left can do to stop it. Love you guys. God bless.
Before you go, let me say this. Patriots around the country are winning right now, but you won't see it on the evening news. Every week, I put together the real story of the victories, the momentum, and the proof that the MAGA movement is not slowing down. Scan the QR code to join our newsletter so your weekend starts with the truth, not their narrative.